Well, really excited for this session, guys. First of all, thank you. Thank you for trusting us with your time at this conference. I know there's many sessions to go to, and you chose this one here. I'm sure we'll be able to deliver lots of value and have lots of fun along the way. If I end up saying, I don't know, this call or this Zoom, excuse me, this is like the first time we've had an in-person event in a while.
Is it for real?
I don't know, it's commercial, yeah. So look, really looking forward to it. Very kind introduction as it was introduced. My name's Evan, I'm the co-founder and CEO of Checkbox, and I have the privilege of working with Ben here, and I would love to have him share his story with you guys today around how he built, together with his team, a much more scalable delivery of legal services at Woolies. So maybe as a starting point, Ben, you've got a very long time. You look like a lot of things at Woolworths. I think a lot of us know the Woolworths brand, of course. But you manage Woolies X. What's that? What's digital? What's brand? What's your role broadly?
Good question. So as I think Tony mentioned, Woolies X is kind of the cutting edge of Woolworths retail. I guess it's everything e-commerce, loyalty, digital media, all those digital sinews that connect everything in the back end. We have, this is kind of also part of that, a digital media business called Cartology. We do financial services through WPay, sort of in that sphere as well. In addition to all those things that Woolworths has been doing forever, like shifting products around the country and selling them through stores and those kind of things. So my role is very much focused on that kind of, broadly speaking, digital land, and how you sort of capture that in the title is always very hard to look at. That's really the focus from my specific team. Although, of course, I'm part of the broader legal team for Woolworths and sitting on the legal leadership team. And across my colleagues, we handle legal issues for the whole group.
Awesome. And today's session is really about scale. So let's start with that, right? So give us a sense of the scale. How large is the legal team that you look after, and how large is the business that you guys support as well?
Where to start? I think Woolworths is, I think we say, Australia's largest private sector employer. No one's checking the maths on that, but I think we've got about 160 to 180,000 team members if you include all the stores, and depending on the season, Christmas and the like. But so a lot of people working for Woolworths. One of the metrics that I find really colourful to kind of bring it to life is how big at least the support office, which is what we call our head office function, is that pre-COVID at least, you'd have sort of 5,000 people walking through scanning their parcel, and about 70% of those people have been working for us less than 2 years. So growth, it's it was nowhere near that 12 months ago or 2 years ago or whatever. And it was only that Woolies X side is only 5 years old, just turning 5 years now.
Got it. And a lot of you may be able to tell from the role here, Ben manages a lot. But also what's really incredible is you've taken Woolworths Legal through this sort of transformation journey over the last few years. Not just heads down, being able to get through the legal work and manage the risk, but also really look at the future of how the department's going to look like and make sure that we're protecting for scale and for delivery quality, right? So walk back a few years for me. What did Woolies Legal look like before you started kind of that journey, and what does it look like today?
I'll cast my mind back about 5 years ago or so when I joined, and actually see a couple of people in the audience who've been part of that journey. So an important part of that journey too, actually, Neil and Vicky. But we, so we use Google, which for a lot of lawyers, particularly coming out of private practice, like I did, is a compulsory flip out moment when you realise that you're not using the safety of Outlook anymore. We did not have a document management system. We did not have a matter management system. We had a contract management system that barely anyone knew how to use, and was not being put to any effective use, I think. That was what, and people were doing documents in Google Docs and sometimes Word, but sometimes our client couldn't read Word documents. yeah, that's what, and so it was Google Gmail emails and then hodgepodge of that's what legal was like back in time.
Yeah. And what does it look like today?
Well, we still use Google Documents, and actually, funnily enough, we store all our documents still in Google Drive, which sounds unusual for those of us who are used to kind of having that kind of filing system. And what we found is that when we finally landed on a matter management system, we kind of deep linked through that into with a URL into the right Google Drive link, and all of a sudden we have a categorization or a catalog for all of our legal matters now, all of a sudden. So without actually ever having actually purchased a document management system. So that's an interesting end result for that, and which is actually working for us quite nicely. As I've mentioned, we do now have a matter management system, and still kind of sniffing around to finalise what we do for contract management. But I think the important part of all of that, Evan, is that we aren't just sort of the polished up poster child of perfect legal tech. It's been a kind of a scrappy journey. It's kind of looking at different things, and we really prioritise trying to find work out actually, do we need all of those things, or actually what is it that are the barriers to the ways of working? Because actually our voice of team metrics have gone from consistently, I don't have the tools for doing my job, and scoring very poorly in that regard, to actually scoring quite well in that regard now. So either something's changed or expectations have changed. Maybe people have given up trying, and I know this. I hope I'm not a pariah saying this in a legal tech conference, but it's about finding your own right journey for what you need and getting the tools to solve your problems. We certainly have invested in some tools, and they've worked really nicely for us.
And I know that you just mentioned you stuck with Google Drive, right? It was already available for the enterprise. I think that's a very interesting approach. Often we think about, do we acquire new specific tools for legal, or do we use what IT has asked us to use? But you've done a really interesting thing where you've taken a hybrid of those existing tools like Google, but then also what was different from 3 or 5 years ago was you were able to bring in these other tools and integrate those systems to actually take something that wasn't working, not because of the tool, but because of the way that you perhaps was connecting with it.
The way we didn't have a good interaction with it, and we were able to kind of resolve that over time.
Yeah, and can you shed some light on it? Like, how does that look like? So where does the original, obviously that's where the documents are stored at the end of the day, but documents don't just magically appear and end up in the repository. Like, how does it?
Well, I don't know about that, Edwin, actually. We now do have some documents that just automatically appear in there, and through some of your technology, actually. But what's it like at the moment? So we use a matter management system where kind of browser integrated. Someone opens a matter, sends a signal at the moment that sends a signal to our admin team, and we'll just quickly open a matter and link a new Google folder to it, and then effectively that's where people will store matters. But when we're, one of the things we'll probably touch on today is that the checkbox that we use does create documents, but we have a way of flowing that through to cause a matter to open through an integration you've done with the matter management platform, and then that actually then flows through to being able to store documents in our Google Drive, which is pretty cool. But it doesn't really matter in a way whether it's kind of our admin team like doing that, or whether it's the next generation is the technology doing it. The main point is, are people happy with the process to make that work?
Absolutely. And I think often when we talk about streamlining and automation in this topic, the first thing that always pops up is NDAs, right? So keep your hands down. Wait, I'm trying to do a double negative here. Keep your hands down if you have already heard of NDA automation. Put your hands up if you have not. Look at that audience participation, amazing. See, proves my point. So everyone's, it's an overused example, right? NDA automation. And whilst that is a really good test pilot, it's a good place to start because it's a simple document, everyone understands it, it's typically high volume, low risk, and you started there as well, but I don't want to talk about that, that's spoken about a lot. I want to talk about some of the other sort of areas that you've looked at when you've innovated in sort of the legal service delivery, like NDA is the obvious one. Let's move past that for a moment. You've done some interesting stuff that's not even document based, right? Often you think about legal team, how do we get efficiencies in documents, but you've done work outside of documents. Can you talk a bit about that?
Yeah. And we did start with an NDA. Well, we didn't start with an NDA, but that was how I learned how to use it. So when I went into Evan's office and said, "Show me how this works," he said, "Well, you show me how it works," and I was able to create something. We use that as an internal training tool, actually, rather than that much of a client-focused thing, because how frequently you really use them. But so one of the problems that I was trying to solve when Evan and I first started talking is that I had just inherited the privacy kind of team I talked about. So the whole team I've talked about now has been cobbled together over the last few years. It sort of didn't exist a few years ago. We sort of started with some of it built out. And what we found was that it's a common story, I think, that this lack of role clarity between business and legal, and the ability for legal teams to potentially crowd out the business when it comes to risk management because the business is not doing it, so we better get on and do it. And so we were spending, in my estimation at least, too much time on really mundane data incidents. So I'm not talking about the kind where they're notifiable or even half notifiable or even problematic on anyone's stretch, but just I'm loving that I'm seeing some nodding. It's really self-affirming. Anyway, I was really troubled by the amount of effort that we seem to be spending from a legal function in that area. And my goal, it took a little while to realise it, to actually map out what it is that we cared about every time we were having a look at that from a legal perspective, was to say, what are the questions my team are asking themselves when they're going, what information they're seeking, what processes of thought are they going through in order to come up with what seemed to me the same, I couldn't count more than 4 outcomes. From all of that kind of noise, all of that client whinging, all of that searching for information, but ultimately there were stretching from keep doing nothing through to we need to notify a regulator about this and shit is hitting the fan proverbially. So how do we kind of, what is it that takes us from one of those to another? And I guess for every organisation it's different because it's based on your own risk appetite, but there were certain things that we could see. And then the first thing was that we always lacked the information at the time that the request came through. So we were this kind of glorified information gopher team running around all across the organisation. We seemed to be the only one who cared about getting the information, and everyone else seemed really busy, too busy to provide it. And so we would spend an inordinate amount of time searching for information, losing friends along the way, for badgering people. And then we would finally get all the information, or some of it, and realise that like I said, there'd be a couple of outcomes. And then we started plotting those on a frequency chart, and I think the number was literally, like the 80-20 rule. I think it was like literally 80% of them we shouldn't be caring about. Could have been 70, I don't know. So it was a lot. And so I set myself a very not that big a goal, just to say, can we just cut out half the time we're spending in this area? And which we've achieved, which is great. But we then set about trying to just codify those. Like, what are we always asking for? And can we create a interface where people are actually reporting that, like when they're actually saying, oh, there's an incident, they're actually giving us the right information the first time, because we have, and it's great to have a smart form functionality because you don't have to ask 1,000 questions to get to the 3 relevant facts you need to know, or if you do need something more detailed, then you can come, work through that. And so, first time-saving piece was just getting the information we wanted at the right time. So that was good. because up until then everything had been, including remarkable. I wonder if there's any more nods to help affirm this for me, but I'm looking at you. Including that if the legal team had someone write to them an email saying that there's an issue, the legal team had to call up a incident management centre hotline, and then they had to explain to them what the issue was, for them to type it into a thing and then for it to come back to us so that we could answer it. Like, it was, everyone's got their own crazy scenarios. But that was one. But, and then we basically built on a piece of paper, effectively, without Checkbox, built a kind of a rule set to say, okay, if this, does that kind of up our level of risk, or does it down our level of risk, or is it neutral for us? We just kind of made a bit of a calculator based on different elements that express the harm that could be caused by this scenario. So was this someone's left a single piece of paper on a store counter, and a customer has said, hey, you shouldn't leave that on the store counter, and that was ripped up. Because previously that scenario was dealt with the same level of effort as, wide-ranging cyber incident impacting our customer database, so in the loyalty context. So hugely different scale of things. We're able to take that rule set, get that effectively endorsed by some of the key stakeholders from a risk perspective, in a way that we knew that once this had been in operation and being useful, we'd be able to speak to the board about the numbers that it was, and the risk committee about the numbers that it was spitting out. And the long story short is that now that we've been able to use that, we're actually getting numbers that we're able to report on, and there's this visibility from that app, which is so important. So yes, it saved my team time, and I feel great about that, and my team feels great about that, because they're doing things that they'd rather do than that. But actually the greater benefit was that it has really, that and a few other things that we've done, has really shown, put a spotlight on the power of how I told you about the number of 160,000 people. There's 160,000 employees and untold number of customers who, in theory, could report a data incident to us. How do we make something that's accessible to as many of them as possible? And the checkbox, really simple checkbox app we made is really accessible to the 160,000. We don't have, my team. This is the whole point about scale, right? Like, it was one-to-one. One person in my team can only get to so many, and there's only so many privacy awareness weeks you can have, and all those kinds of things. But ultimately, the systems doing the thinking, and it gets high level kind of visibility, and so that's really brought us funding, importantly, and time and a bit of trust to have a crack at things. So starting with something that has some visibility, I think, outside and utility outside of the legal team was really helpful for us.
Absolutely. And that's why I absolutely love sort of the workflow automation space as well, because it's so outwards looking, right? Like, so much of legal tech is about serving the legal team, but you've made a really good point. It's about almost the internal PR to then get the budget and the funding and the buy-in to actually move. And data incidents is a great example, because it's visible to the board, to the CEO, and it was very much a strategic project for you, right? And
that was really we're sort of thinking about what is it that, like, why would we do one app or one use case compared to another, was kind of, actually I wasn't really that, efficiency optimization was not the number one thing. It just had to be useful but visible.
That's super interesting. Yeah, especially because often we think about efficiency being the driver for this kind of change. You're saying that's almost like just the icing on the cake. Really, it was very strategic in picking this project because it allowed you to kind of have that visibility.
It allowed us to do something we couldn't do before, which was actually tell the board what was happening.
So you started with one app, and there's so many other examples I want to touch on. We've got limited time here, but where are you guys at now in your journey? How many apps do you have in the world?
We were laughing about this before. We've got about 60 different apps, right? Are they all as powerful as the one I described? No, and some of them, like testing and learning, some of them are built on and like, you know what? That was a great idea, but now it's led us down a different path. So we've got a whole family of things. Actually, let's I think it's actually, there's no limit in the number of apps you can make. There's so many different things you do on a particular day that you could automate if you wanted to. Actually, it comes down to prioritization, and prioritization comes down to resources or capability to do it. And for us, at the start of our journey, we had kind of no one internally apart from me and one of my colleagues who's a paralegal who's still heavily involved and doing fantastic things. But we kind of did the MBA training with Min at Checkbox. And then we got PwC to come and help us, PwC New Law, actually just to provide a young gun to kind of help us kind of work on some of the ideas we had, which was, because you can't go from sort of zero to like a full team of people at once. But right now what we're finding is that there's so many different areas of the business that are, our culture and people team, finance team, our IT team, all of them want to sort of do their own stuff. Like, so this is not legal tech, this is tech, isn't it? And everyone's kind of got processes that they want to work through. And what we're saying is we can absolutely help, and we can even build for you, but we can't maintain it. And unless you're willing to commit to the resources that will actually understand and build their knowledge of the products that have, it's like selling electric cars if there aren't kind of charging stations around the country. It's kind of hard, right? Or do we have enough mechanics in the team? And really now our major focus is on kind of building the capability, because we've got the interest there. Now we kind of need to build that capability, and there's heaps of really interested minds in this space. And actually the other fact about those 60 apps is I could not tell you what many of them do, which is really cool because my team can. And all those ideas, like, I had some preliminary ideas about when we sort of set it up. The data incident one was one, but actually the number of ideas that they've had that solve their problems, and this is probably why they're feeling like they've got the tools to do their job now in the voice of the team stuff, but they're solving the issues that they have with their clients, and I actually don't need to be part of that. So kind of, how do we sort of provide that space and support for it without telling what to do, I think is important.
And I think that's a tremendous success story in the sense of not only have you been able to drive it from the top down, but now it's actually growing organically bottom up. And I think Holly is a great success story in that, she was the average, not because she's average, she's amazing. Her role was the average paralegal, but now she is, how would you describe Holly?
Together with the tool, she's about as effective a resource as I have. And I've got a great team, but the scale that she can reach through her control of Checkbox, her ability to work with people and the ideas she has. This is not please don't poach.
Sorry, I shouldn't have mentioned the name.
No, but it's fantastic. And actually, this is my proudest thing is that she's super energized in that, and she's been able to have a platform before our chief legal officer and others where she's actually making a difference in a way that, actually she could, but she probably didn't have the platform to do that before. So it's got to actually turbocharged what was a paralegal role into being so much more. And not to say that the lawyers aren't involved as well. And some of them are actually, across, whether it's marketing stuff, whether it's IP stuff, whether it's securities trading stuff that we've been doing. I'm about to fall down. Whatever it might be, we've got a whole. Sorry.
Okay.
I think we've lost the. Sorry, there's a hole there. Sorry, guys. Sorry. Part of the show.
Yeah, it is.
Where was I? Just that ability to empower the team by giving them. I think I've used this with you before. Like this ability to express themselves in a new way, because effectively it's not very hard to use and grasp if you have a bit of a logical mind. And so, we haven't even showed anyone what we're talking about. Does anyone want to see what we? Yeah.
Some nods. I'll grab a quick eye. I think.
Let's see if we didn't destroy it with the water.
Yeah, no, that's right. That's cool. So this was. Oh, whoops! That's our logo. Yes. But this is one of the apps that you guys put at Woolies. This is the direct to boot.
This is really simple. I don't know if those of you who shop online with Woolies, hopefully all of you, certainly more of you after the pandemic than before, by our growth numbers. What we really wanted to do is transition to having people pick up in a really simple, having to go into the store, the service desk, all that kind of hullabaloo, or having to get delivery, which is hard because there's not enough people and trucks in the country to deliver everyone's orders at the moment. So the idea was to go to the store, pick up, happens to be COVID safe, direct to boot. What do you need from that? You need a license from your landlords, and landlords are very quick to stick out their hand for some money. And what are the conditions on which you can have that little car space painted green with a little Woolies logo? And we have 1,000 supermarket sites or thereabouts, and so how do we, CEO is saying we need to get this done really quickly. Boy, do we just have a solution for you. And so we've effectively automated a very simple document. This is just a random screenshot from it, but basically there's some input of information through some of these boxes. Each of these, like that, yeah. Each of these boxes, this is a form, this is a list where you select something, it's another form where you sort of input different information, or like that smart form concept I mentioned before, some more collection details, and then document generation, that purple and that's giving you the list that you need. That's populating into the matter folder, by the way, that I mentioned before, into our Google Drive. You can see there's the email function, get that out straight to the person who's doing. So what we had is that we had, this is not used by the lawyers now, this is used by the property managers. So the property managers are negotiating with one of the landlords, they've struck a deal, they can effectively use this to record the terms of their deal in a kind of a plain English kind of way. Here's the document that you need to do that, having regard to what the underlying status is, etc. So that was just kind of a quick way to actually get legal out of the process. Again, how do we just put the tools in the hands of our clients? And, that had a very high NPS, that one. But it's so simple, right? Like it's actually, not that much magic to it. I liken this to using an iPhone. You don't really know what goes on with the cover, but you know how to press the nice shiny buttons. Scroll through.
Awesome. Well, that's all the time we have for today, folks. I hope you learned a lot, and again, I want you to join me in welcoming, a big thank you to Ben, who's obviously very busy, doing a lot of amazing things, but are still able to come out here today to spend his time with us to share your amazing insights. So thank you so much.